The fourth meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Transportation for this 2022 interim. And before we call roll, I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phone or turn them off. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Senator Berg, Senator Embry, Senator Hornback, Senator Smith, Senator Storm, Senator Turner, Senator Wheeler, Senator Wilson, Senator Wise, Senator Yates, Representative Branscombe, Representative Bratcher, Representative Bridges, Representative Dixon, Representative Fleming,
Present.
Representative Hale, Representative Heverin,
Present.
Representative Regina Huff, Representative Thomas Huff,
Here.
Representative Lewis,
Present.
Representative Maddox, Representative McCool,
Here.
Representative McPherson,
Here.
Representative Miller,
Here.
Representative Palumbo, here, Representative Santoro,
Here.
Representative Smith,
Here.
Representative Stevenson, here, Representative Tackett Lafferty, here, Representative Thomas,
Present.
Representative Westrom, Representative Wheatley,
Here.
Co-Chair Upchurch,
Here.
Chairman Higdon.
Here, we do have a quorum, and we will proceed. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the committee minutes from the August 16th meeting. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Our first order of business today looks like regional driver's license, and Matt Cole, Commissioner, and Sarah Jackson, Real ID Project Manager. Sarah and Matt, welcome to the committee. You're no strangers here, and it's good to see you all today. And if you don't mind, introduce yourself for the record, and please proceed.
I'm Sarah Jackson.
Yeah, turn your microphone on.
I'm Sarah Jackson, and I'm the Real ID Project Manager in the Office of the Secretary of Transportation.
I thought you were going to say I'm the real Sarah Jackson.
I'm the real deal.
Please stand up. And I'm Matthew Cole. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Vehicle Regulation here at the Cabinet.
Thank you very much for inviting us again to give you an update. And we're moving very quickly and adding new features and reassessing. So I appreciate the opportunity to update you. Having completed transitioning all of Kentucky's 120 circuit court clerks off driver's licensing and ID card issuance by June 30th, per House Bill 453, we find ourselves continuing to improve on our regional model. The next months are going to be marked by study and adjustment. For example, is the ratio of walk-in slots versus appointments at regional offices working well for that office? Is line management, if necessary, working in a particular site? Are our employees' processing skills up to speed? Is further customer service needed in certain areas? Design and space utilization of the regional offices, is it working? How many more cash lines may be needed in certain sites? These are just a few areas we are studying, and we believe tweaks and adjustments are essential to the success, ultimately, of any new program. And I'm going to constantly remind everyone that this switch to a regional issuance model has been one of the most significant business process changes ever presented to a state government front-facing agency. We know and we certainly expect there is more work to be done. We want to deliver the best options for Kentuckians, and we have learned that each office has its own unique challenges. For example, in some offices, we see almost exclusively cash payments. In others, we see almost no one using the appointment option. While we still are very much a work in progress, I do want to detail a few recent accomplishments. 32 regional driver licenses have been opened across the Commonwealth. The newest opening this week in Bellevue, 103 Landmark Drive in Campbell County. Also significant is that our daily issuance numbers, meaning the total credentials issued on a given day across the state, are now trending at or higher than the daily total when circuit court clerks headed up the program. Real ID enforcement begins May 3rd of 2023. The Kentucky's Real ID adoption rate, that means how many Kentuckians are choosing a Real ID out of the total pool of credentialed Kentuckians. Currently, it's at 15.2, and I do want to note that last time I was here, it was at 12.7. We started in earnest in 2020, and the adoption rate was 1%. We're expecting a final adoption rate in the 35% range. But the real story on Real ID adoption is what we are seeing daily. A daily Real ID issuance rate of 32 to 35%. So that means on any given day, those coming into all of our offices, 32 to 35% of them are having Real IDs issued or renewed. Remote options. We've worked really hard to offer various types of remote renewal options. More than 223,000 Kentuckians have skipped a trip to the office and renewed their driving credentials online, and that's since Online Renewal debuted June of last year, of 2021. Kentuckians also have an option of renewing or replacing a lost or stolen ID, or even completing an address change by mail, and nearly 27,000 people have done so. If you add those two remote options together, just under 250,000 of Kentuckians have skipped a trip. Pop-up events. Kentucky's mobile driver licensing program is known as the pop-up program, and it visits each county that does not have a regional office. County judge executives and local libraries are our local partners. There are 94 eligible pop-up counties, and we have already held 160 pop-up events in the first 9 months of 2022. By statute, each county gets 2, 3, 4, or 5 visits a year based on population. We're required to host 220 pop-up events a year. I'm pleased to report we're on track to meet our statutory deadline of pop-up visits by the end of this calendar year. But even greater news is that due to their overwhelming popularity, we are now studying the feasibility of expanding pop-up visits. So stay tuned. I know you have an interest in the Eastern Kentucky flood relief efforts. The governor requested the pop-ups be dispatched as soon as word broke as to the devastation. And having helped in a similar way in West Kentucky with the tornadoes, we already had a bit of a blueprint as to how to manage a widespread effort of this sort. Understand that identification in the form of a driver's license or an ID card was among the first needs of those affected by the flooding. This identification was needed to start the application process for so many other forms of aid and help. The mobile licensing program was immediately on the ground, offering services in 11 locations, FEMA disaster recovery centers and Kentucky State resort parks, sheltering those that were displaced by the floods. Our services were open to the public for nearly 700 business hours over 23 days, and more than 40 KYTC employees from regional offices across the state worked at these emergency disaster relief pop-ups. More than 3,300 Kentuckians were issued credentials at the emergency pop-ups. Now, there were also regional offices in some of these areas who also continued operating. Those are the points that I would like to make, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt to give you a few other what we consider exciting developments on our front.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we're very excited to share what's going on in just the pop-ups in Eastern Kentucky alone was just so impressive, and the team that responded to that, we had over 42 different employees that pitched in and helped in just in excess of their daily duties. So we were super proud of those efforts. Now, as we start to kind of establish this program, our focus moves to process improvement in the regional offices. As the driver's license begins to mature, we want to focus on fine-tuning processes that not only benefit our staff, but also the services that the customers will receive in our offices. We continue to review our ratio of appointments versus walk-ins per location. We've created a training team in our central office that travels to all the regional offices to add training to their daily duties. And then we also are looking to enhance customer service procedures, and like Sarah mentioned, we're promoting the mail-in forms and the online renewals for those individuals that are in a hurry. We don't want to say we're full for the day. Sorry, we want to be able to provide options. We give them cards that has a QR code that'll take them straight to the online renewal portal. We'll hand them out a mail-in form right there in the office and say, if you want to fill this out, you can drop it off with us. We'll fill it out, or we'll process it today and complete it, and it'll be sent in the mail. So we're learning that customer service aspect that's above and beyond just the daily traffic volume. We know that those people need those credentials, and we're figuring out ways to get it to them quicker. And it's not just driver's license and ID card issuance at our regional offices. Some of the many other programs we provide are CDLs, excuse me, graduated license program, no pass, no drive, ignition interlock devices, reinstatement fees, state traffic school, and homeless IDs, which we've really started to make that program more robust in more locations, more of our regional offices. So that'll continue to grow. For future technology, as the identity industry continues to evolve, KYTC will evolve with it. We are working with our technology team to launch a mobile driver's license program that will enable citizens to put a digital copy of their credential on their smartphone. This technology will offer more options for the citizens of the Commonwealth, and more importantly, it will limit the amount of information shared to only what is necessary for that particular transaction. The old day of handing your driver's license and giving all the information on it to that individual that you may not know well, now with this electronic interaction, you can just confirm a person's age, or just confirm, if where they live for law enforcement. So again, more security options. Not only that, TSA is a leader in adopting this technology, and we will see them start accepting mobile driver's license in commercial airports this fall. Our IT team has begun the task of replacing our old mainframe kidless database with a web-based solution named Kindle. This will produce a system that will be more user-friendly. It will lead to more automated functions that will ease pressure on our overworked staff, and that in turn will expedite the services that we provide the customers. These items are on the horizon and are quickly approaching us. This team will continue to work diligently to bring these products to the state as they come available and find the best way to bring them to life. In regards to driver testing, I know that you'll hear from the Kentucky State Police soon, but I'm glad to report that our partnership has grown even stronger through this transition. Major Day and Captain Johnson are great to work with and are constantly working on new innovation to benefit all new drivers. As we move forward, one of our next steps will be to evaluate the staffing levels at the regional offices, like Sarah said, to ensure that we're providing the best customer service. With all of the online options and mail-in options, we're providing more choices for Kentuckians than we ever have. We will experience growing pains as we go, but the good news is that the goals that you have and the expectations that you have for these regional offices are the same goals that we have as well. Perfection is the goal, but it is a long path, and we will continue to adjust and improve in all areas. We look forward to keeping you informed along the way, and of course, if you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out for any assistance.
Well, thank you for that presentation. I'm sure we're going to have some questions. I have a few myself. First, Sarah, I want to commend you for your work. You've been I don't know how many times, if I had $1 for every time I've called you in this transition, we could probably buy something significant. Okay, build a bridge. I don't know if it'd be that many. And Matt, also, you've been very accessible, and I'd encourage anyone on the committee, if you have an issue, you hear an issue back about the regional offices, please give Sarah a call. Like I said, she has done great work as far as trying to get us where we need to be. It's a huge undertaking, and it's not been the smoothest transition but it's one of the biggest transitions that we've done in state government. And like I said, the effort has really been there, and I think you're eventually will be there. And I do appreciate your dedication to making sure that things do. I guess we resolve the issues that we're having, and you have done that, and I appreciate it and want to commend you for that.
Thank you.
Representative Bratcher has a question.
Yes, I couldn't go by without thanking Miss Sarah too. And I took my wife to get the real ID, and there was a lot of people there. And man, I tell you what, you guys, that they processed that in a timely fashion, and it was really working well. And I really, as much as I bashed the Department of Transportation all the time, I got to praise you guys for that. As far as in Louisville, now I know that I've heard some pipe ups from other guys in other areas, but Louisville's running like a well-oiled machine, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bratcher. And we have, there's been a few regional offices that we've heard complaints on, but we've heard a lot of compliments out of many of the regional offices that are doing a very good job. And I think Sarah is working on the ones that we're having issues with. And Representative McPherson has a question.
Yes, Ms. Jackson. So I represent the Warren County, Allen, Simpson area, District 22. It looks like Bowling Green's got a pretty big donut hole around it here to where where we've got a lot of population being served by the Bowling Green area. I consistently get people about once a month in my office really, first thing they say is the personnel are great. They're doing a wonderful job. But the location, if you Google it, it takes you to the wrong side of the building, and the building is very small when you get there, and they can't hold but just a few people. And so I get a lot of complaints about that. The people they say are great, but it looks like we're serving a big population there with a building that a lot of people tell me when you Google it, it just does not take you to the building. It takes you to the wrong side.
Well, that's something that we can address with our I-team and public affairs team. They can go into Google and make these adjustments. As for the building size, we've already doubled it when we moved from one side of the building to the other, and that's one of those constant adjustments that we'll watch. If we get to a point and we realize it's the wrong fit, we're not afraid to make those changes. We've already done it in several locations. It's kind of under those things, you don't know something until you know it, and once we realize something isn't working, then we go back, we engage with the finance cabinet, and we find other options. So just because the office is where it is now doesn't mean that we're not afraid to move it and put it in a better situation.
I appreciate that. And again, I want to tell you that they say the personnel are great, so I appreciate that.
I was recently down there. I'm trying to get to all the offices several times in the next month or two, and I was down there recently and was very impressed with the personnel. That building has tremendous parking, which is great. We have some offices that we get complaints about the parking situation. And so I'm very pleased with the facility for Bowling Green. I'm pleased with where the state police is located, adjacent, I believe, to our office. But we're working harder at signage there, and we did have a Google issue initially, and we will go back to comms. It was actually, if you put the address in, it didn't show up. And it's a large shopping center with several retail Starbucks and some other things in it. So it should show up. That was a few months ago, but we will go back to comms and communications and see if we can't explore that Google some more. Thank you, sir.
Representative Branscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. Thank you both for being here today. And I want to echo some of those comments. I know this has been a huge undertaking, and really want to commend both of you and your departments for what you've been doing. One question I have, and I understand we're continuing to fine-tune this. I've had some constituents who have had problems with the online renewal. They've attempted to renew online, but there's been a glitch or whatever that may be, and then they ended up having to go in person. I just want to see, is that isolated? Have you guys ran into that, or is this just a product of that continuous fine tuning?
We have made improvements with our online renewal. I think one thing that some people is it will not renew an expired credential. So a lot of times that's the one that'll get them and that'll throw the error message. Like I say, with our IT team working with Kindle to make a web-based modern solution that was built in this century, it's going to open up a lot more opportunities for us electronically. It took us a while to get ID cards added to driver's license online. So like I say, what you see right now is not the finished product, but just, we're just waiting to take another step and another step. So we've fixed a lot of the glitches that were in the online renewal, but if any of them pop up, please send them our way because we want to know about it. We have a great team that does great response time and getting those things fixed. Right now, we feel like it's in excellent shape, but like I said, we're always willing to explore something.
And these could have been a product of expired licenses, so it could have been that situation.
That's most likely.
And sometimes it's a picture that's way too old. Every time your license is renewed, the picture was supposed to be retaken. That was at the local level, and we found times where they weren't retaken time and time and time again. And so these people go in with this picture from, 16 years ago.
They really like the way they look.
Yeah, and it doesn't work with the online renewal. And I will say one other thing I learned at the state fair. I've helped people through online renewal many times. We had laptops at the state fair to help people with online renewal. And we had a booth, and I even made mistakes and got kicked out of the system a few times because of the date. So you can always ask someone to please recheck the date they entered for their date of birth. I think it's a date of birth. The drop downs are a little bit confusing to someone. Every system you use has different system with drop downs. And on this one, I have shared it with IT, and I know they'll look into it. But even I got kicked off a few times, and somebody rescued me, a coworker, and said you didn't have the right 1947 or 59 in. So just those are my best suggestions. And if someone's really having problem with online renewal, reach out to me in the office of the secretary, and I can reach out to IT, and hopefully they wouldn't even have to have a trip to the office. We can cure that and get right back with them.
Well, thank you both for your continued
Thank you,
work
sir.
on this.
Absolutely.
Sir, if you don't mind, would you go over on the online renewal, there's several conditions, like I said, if it's license expired, and the change of address, there's several things that if you have those issues, you can't renew online.
You may now renew a standard license or a real ID driver license, or a standard ID or a real ID card. You may not do a change of address online yet. You may not, you're probably kicked off if your picture is more than 16 years old, which it shouldn't be, but at any rate, you can be kicked off if your picture is too old, and it will not process if you are currently expired. Can you think of anything else, Matt?
And also CDLs are still done in person per federal regulation. So that's one thing that's not available at this time, but there has been talks about some modernization coming up for that. So whatever they allow, we'll quickly adapt to as well.
And Senator, if I might add, on mail-in renewals, which is a form that gets mailed in to the office with your payment, you may do address changes. You can do all of what I just mentioned, but you may also do change of address and replace a lost or stolen. It's very hard to renew. You can't replace a lost or stolen card on an online renewal because the presumption is you wouldn't have your driver license number in order to do it, et cetera, because it was taken away from you, unless I guess you recorded it. So.
Okay, the 32 regional offices now.
Correct.
Are there? What is the maximum number you will end up having, or is that it?
No, we are never saying never. We are continuing to study, and we believe that right now we need to look at the daily volume. I've already told you that the daily volume is up to and above what the circuit clerks were doing, and we are not ruling out any further expansion of offices, but we do believe it's only fair at this point to assess how things are working and how full we might be capacity-wise, et cetera. We do expect to be busy. There are only 7 months leading up to Real ID's enforcement date. So when I tell you that we're over capacity, in other words, we're doing more business than the circuit clerks did, it's probably because there are people getting real IDs now that aren't necessarily needing to renew. They're going ahead and getting real IDs because they're still a few years out from renewal, but they're going to need it in May maybe. So I want to remind you that we initially started this process thinking there'd be 14 to 20, 16 to 21 offices. We're at 32 and holding just for now to see how things are panning out.
Right, we kind of need to let staffing and locations run under a full load for the fiscal year just to make sure that we're tracking properly. And of course, we'll make adjustments from there.
One other thing that we passed this past year in legislation was expired license. They can be expired now up to 5 years.
Correct.
And you can still renew them without going through all the jumping through the hoops. Senator Wheeler, I didn't see him. That's his legislation, and that was a great common sense piece of legislation, Senator Wheeler. Thank you very much. That is good. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that. Another thing was we talked about the May 3rd date approaching for the real ID. There are other forms. A military ID will serve as a real ID as far as military installation, federal courthouse, or flying on a domestic flight. Military ID will work because that is a real ID. And also your passport will work. So as we get closer to that May 3rd date, I think I saw the statistic, and you probably know this, is how many people in Kentucky have a passport. It's a large number,
Million,
I think it was 25% of the population.
25%.
a million point something, yes.
And so that'll certainly be helpful as we get closer. We don't have a last minute rush, because you don't have to have a real ID to drive a car. You just have to have a real ID to travel on a domestic flight.
And that's one thing we wanted to make sure everybody knew is your license doesn't invalidate on that date. It's just we want them to know what is different. You can still drive, you can still do age-related purchases, you can still vote. There's no restrictions on those items. The only three that on that date that will be enforced will be the commercial domestic flight, military bases, and restricted federal buildings. And the feds have assured us that any building that provides a benefit or an entitlement is not going to be a restricted building. So we don't want that panic to get out there that they think they have to rush in and get it. They can plan that change for what works with their schedule. If they know I'm not traveling until late this year or the next year when they're in 23, then they can come in and do it at their convenience. We just want them to know what those limitations are so they can plan accordingly.
And Senator Higdon, along the lines of your comments, you will see messaging in the time ahead where we will make it very clear: passport card, global entry, Department of Defense issued, those are all forms of real ID. And, we're working very hard on the messaging right now. Shortly you'll see it. And I think that we're making great strides. When I see 35% choosing a day real IDs, as real ID project manager, I am very comforted with that.
Well, thank you for your work on that. And I would encourage any of the members, when there's a pop-up driver's license mobile unit comes to your community, be sure to go by and visit. It's very interesting to see how all that works, and hear your constituents, their comments that they have about it. It is good. So thank you all very much. And again, you got a question over here? Okay. Representative Palumbo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to do so.
Matt and I will be the first to tell you that we have a remarkable team. Mm-hmm. And I know most of you have worked with me in various roles in state government my entire career. And I just have to tell you that the Transportation Cabinet is like no other. And it moves like a well-greased machine, open to change, open to suggestion, and really hard-working people. And they really do care. I mean, everything is aimed at the citizens of this state. So thank you for recognizing that, and we're going to share that with the team, because I don't think they always hear thank you enough.
For sure.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Matt. And members, please take note. If you have any calls or any issues with driver's licensing, please reach out to Sarah. She is very responsive, and I appreciate that. We'll also recognize Kenny Bishop. He's our legislative liaison. So any issues you have, give Kenny a call, and he's very responsive also.
Yes.
He'll certainly get back to you. He might not answer on the first ring, but he will get back to you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Our next item is Captain Marshall Johnson, Driver's Testing Branch, Kentucky State Police. Captain Johnson, welcome to the committee, and if you don't mind, identify yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm Captain Marshall Johnson. I'm with the Kentucky State Police Driver Testing Branch. And
Turn your microphone on there. Make sure the green light's on.
okay. As I said, I am Captain Marshall Johnson. I'm with the Kentucky State Police Driver Testing Branch, and appreciate the opportunity to speak today and provide an update on regional driver testing. We did prepare a presentation. I won't go through all of those, but I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to give some information that we receive questions about on a regular basis, routine questions about scheduling and availability of appointments. So repeatedly through those slides, you will see the exact URL for our website, which is the first place to go for information on testing. In terms of the regional update, we are now testing we have established testing sites in 27 regional offices. The transportation folks, they mentioned that there are 32 of their regional offices. We're in 27 of those now. We'll add Bellevue here in the coming weeks, and we're excited about that opportunity. There are a few slides that I wanted everybody to see that are specific to our website, like the regional map. These snapshots will show where we have instructions for the scheduling, a link for the online scheduling tool, and a list of locations can also be found on the website. Additionally, all three of the testing manuals are available for download. And we would like to remind everyone that the driver manuals are the only source material an applicant should study for the written and knowledge test. One of the questions we always get is about the availability, and particularly people see a no availability message on our online schedule. You can see from this snapshot there underneath the Danville Regional Test site where it's listing no availability. The online schedule tool is automated and releases new appointments every day at 8 a.m. New appointments are scheduled 3 weeks into the future. Once the appointments are full, a no availability message will appear, but new appointments will release the next morning at 8 a.m. So you can see from the example here, we utilized for today at 8 a.m. appointments for 3 weeks out. October 11th released at 8 a.m. right on the dot. Once those are consumed, it's not that there won't be more appointments, it's just automated to release more appointments in the morning that would coincide with 3 weeks out. The bottom line for a lot of it is if you see no availability on the message, if you see the no availability message on the schedule or location you need, just please check back at 8 a.m. for additional availability. In terms of the services we offered, we too have completed the regional transition, and in July we shifted the testing availability in terms of it was expanded by allowing applicants to schedule testing appointments at any test location they choose. Still, we continuously monitor the availability of appointments and adjust our scheduling to maximize our output, very similar to what transportation does. We look to see if are we offering enough road appointments? Are we offering enough written test appointments? And adjusting those accordingly. Our other efforts to maximize output includes ensuring our training and technology are up to date. Training and software updates are ongoing for us, and we expect both to increase efficiency and testing capacity. Several months ago, we began using tablets instead of the traditional kiosk and written paper tests that many of us took as kids. Since then, 11 of our locations are now using tablets for administering the written tests, and eventually all of the locations will be outfitted with tablets. We are continuously working to fill vacancies and increase staffing to improve wait times and availability. We have received tremendous support to this end, and personnel expansion efforts are currently underway. Our testing volume to date is nearly in line with the testing numbers from 2021. This is true of the road tests as well as our written tests. But we are committed to continue to improve in this area. Like the transportation cabinet, we want to go out and evaluate how we're processing people through the offices and getting them in and out quickly, and the technology and support that we received over the last couple of years has made it very, very possible for us to improve in that area. Again, we're receiving tremendous support of our testing services and personnel, which ultimately contribute to the larger goal of increased highway safety. We thank the Transportation Cabinet and Commissioner Cole and the real Sarah Jackson, and for all that they do. They're very communicative with us about where we stand and how we can work better together and provide everything that we need when we call them. And they've been tremendous to work with throughout this port. So to them and to the committee members and everyone that's been supportive of us, we appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today and your continued support of our efforts. So I will take questions at this point.
Captain Johnson, thank you. And again, also I appreciate your availability. There are a lot of questions that have come up over this past year or so, and you've been very responsive, and I appreciate that. Most of the members here, I think just about everybody voted in the transportation bill. There was additional money for additional personnel. I know you were, I forget how many, 70 or so personnel you were short in the driver's testing area. Could you give us an update on how that's going and how close you are to having the full team assembled?
We expect the full expansion efforts to begin actually on October 1st. So we're moving in the right direction with that. And you're correct, we were severely shorthanded. The transition and a number of variables, put us in a position where we just had to have more personnel to support the services that we're providing. And we're, thanks to those additional funds, we're in a position to do that. I expect to see some manifestation of those efforts certainly by the end of the year, but we'll begin in earnest on October 1st.
Good deal. And of course the major complaint that I hear, and I'm sure other members of the committee, is that the students had to travel twice, once for their written and knowledge test, and then for their actual skills test or the driving test. And you and I have talked about trying to, over this next year, come up with a way to maybe be able to do the written and knowledge test at the local level. And I know you're working on that, and I appreciate your work on that, because if we can eliminate one of those trips to the regional office, I think it would be doing our constituents, our young people, a real service. So I think that's very important. And one other thing I'd like for you to comment on. Early on, there was restrictions. You could only get take your driver's test or your permit test at the regional office and what region you were in. Now, I think now you can go to any location, any facility to do those.
That is correct. In July, we released that restriction. It was solely related to personnel and trying to make sure we could accommodate the staff, the population that was coming into those offices. But we released that restriction in July, and now people can select the location or testing site that best suits them or best fits their schedule. And we've seen a significant improvement and positive feedback from the community based on that decision. It really provides some additional flexibility for people, particularly since everything else is regional already. It allows them to work it into their schedules as it best suits them. So.
Okay. Senator Berg has a question.
Thank you, sir. I actually, if it's okay, have two quick questions. The numbers that you said what we are doing in 2022 versus 2021, have we gotten back to, or at least steady state or exceeded pre-pandemic numbers yet? Or are we still struggling with trying to come out of that in this state? And then my second question, are we stuck with that 3-week scheduling window because of IT issues? Because, when somebody goes online and they see that we can't get an appointment, already you're behind the 8 ball and making them a happy person. Even if they could schedule an appointment for 4 or 5 weeks out, they got an appointment. And, for some of us whose kids, coming of age and it's a big deal and you want that appointment and you want everything scheduled, you can't do that with the current window limitations.
Yes, ma'am. So for your first question, we referenced the 2021 numbers because they are more reflective of pre-pandemic issues. The 2022 numbers are, you must adjust a little bit for what was mentioned, the legislation that reduced the requirement or changed the requirement for an expired test. So that reduced our volume just a little bit, because if you were falling within that 1 year to 5-year expiration window, you didn't have to come see us anymore. So those are pretty reflective of what we were seeing pre-pandemic. In terms of the schedule, that was a select. We've adjusted that a number of times, and again, like it's been mentioned already, we're not opposed to adjusting it if it makes sense. The schedule at 3 weeks was set that way because what we had historically seen in driver testing was that when you got beyond basically a 2-week period, you started to see no-shows. And it was so impactful during the pandemic that people were scheduling and taking appointments that were, quite frankly, frantic about getting the appointment. So it would schedule them with really no intention of ever being there. And so it was hard for us to articulate to the customer, the front-facing customer, hey, you can't get in when nobody's showing up. So in order to minimize that, we reduced it down. Then we extended it out 3 weeks. So for that very reason, people had articulated to us that at some point you needed to be able to plan a little bit further out than just a couple of weeks. So we're not opposed at all at adjusting it. We continue to work with. I think I've seen them here today. The Telegov service, the people that work with us on the online schedule, to make adjustments to that tool, to evaluate our scheduling and our processes so that people can work that into their schedules as best as they can. We're not opposed to changing that at all. So we'll go back and reevaluate that and see how it goes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes, thank you. I know in my district, they have really made this a painless process, but as painless as it can be anyway. I know that we're running into some bumps, but I just had something that I wanted to respond to with Senator Hignan's comment. One of the things that I have heard as far as the scheduling goes, for instance, when these kids come in and take their written permits or their tests, if they don't bring original documents, are they still being turned away and asked to reschedule appointments, or is there some sort of process where, and this may not even be possible, it's just something that I've heard from my constituents, and wondering if there's some sort of way we can address it. But would there be some sort of way, being that now some folks drive out of county to get to these locations, if they come there and they didn't realize they had to have an original birth certificate, but they have a copy, I'm not sure if there would be a way that we can talk about internally or something that if they can go ahead and take the test, and if they pass it upon return, bring the original document before that is released to them. Maybe just something to keep them from having, because basically what happens is that family drives there and then they're forced to kind of reschedule because maybe of a document that they didn't realize there needed to be an original, but they maybe have a copy of it. So that's just kind of some food for thought that I would put out there, being that I just had a 16-year-old try for his permit and license not long ago. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
As I think has been mentioned before, this entire process has been challenging for everyone. Quite a massive undertaking. To the point of the documents, I'll defer to transportation because really they process the documents. We don't do that. But I will say that we are in a position to have instructed our folks and just extremely confident that probably transportation would support this, is that if we can work it out where they don't have to make 2 trips because of a document, that we'll test them. So if they need to go home and come back, we're okay with that. We'll figure it out within the confines of the schedule. Mistakes to the schedule, all those things we try to adjust for, knowing full well that there are some that are, quite frankly, they're 15 minutes away, and there are some that are a little further. And so we don't want to impose any greater any greater strain on folks than is necessary. So we certainly we'll work with people when it comes to documents in connection with the transportation cabinet and the requirements that are in place for that.
Thank you. That was just a thought. Thanks.
Captain Johnson, seeing no further questions, appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your service and your work with the driver's licensing division. We appreciate that.
Appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is ID and driver's license for individuals without a fixed permanent address. And Representative Bridges, Sharon Frey, and George Eklund, if y'all would please. Representative Bridges, if you will, of course, introduce yourself for the record, and your guests can introduce themselves, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Randy Bridges from District 3, down in far western Kentucky.
My name is George Eklund. I work for the Coalition for the Homeless in Louisville, Kentucky.
Hi, my name is Shannon Fry, and I'm the Services and Volunteer Coordinator at St. John Center in Louisville.
It's okay.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chair and Co-Chair, and the committee today for hearing this. This, on your papers, it says House Bill 197. There will be a change when it's updated into the new system, but this bill passed the House last year. We didn't get it over to the Senate, but Senator Higgin and I had a meeting back at the end of the session last year. We've tried to address some concerns you had, but I'll try to make my part as brief as possible. We do have a problem with homelessness in Kentucky, and actually with the devastation in far west Kentucky and eastern Kentucky, it's even compiling even greater. But the premise of this bill is as much to keep people out of homelessness as it is for the homeless. To allow 16 and 17-year-olds who are homeless to get an ID without parental consent. These youths are ones that have no relationship with their parents, and it uses the McKinney-Vento. It's a federal definition for homelessness, and each youth has to be verified by either a school, a nonprofit, or social service agency, and it mirrors the language we used in the birth certificate language with KRS 213-141 and the mental health access language. They need these documentation to navigate society. It empowers them to overcome obstacles while giving them an essential tool. 581 homeless Kentuckians under 18 in 2020, the last data we had. It also allows a Kentucky driver without a fixed address to renew or replace a driver's license. This is targeted more at Kentuckians that become temporarily homeless through eviction, displacement, or domestic violence. We have 40,000 Kentuckians that have an eviction filed against them during the normal year. Kentucky drivers will have to work with an agency to establish residency, the same process as the homeless ID, and the driver's license will be good only for 4 years, and they will have to pay the standard fees. This will not be a real ID, and this will be for renewals and duplicates only, no new driver's license. And the reason for this is that those that are homeless for short term, so that they can maintain their employment. If they can keep their driver's license, they can get back and forth to work, and hopefully that will prevent them from moving full-time into homelessness. It also makes them more marketable for employment if they don't have employment. And last year, Louisville Service Providers supported 900 people that were homeless and were employed, getting them transportation to and from work. And for many times, the first step to homelessness is living in your car, living in your automobile. So if you have your driver's license taken away, that uses lose that access also. But the change fees, we would ask to drop them from $10 to $5 for those going into homelessness, simply because of the economics of it. But with that, I want to keep it brief. We've had several agencies we've worked with. I want to thank Sarah Jackson for working with us with the Transportation Cabinet. We're still working on some fine-tuning and with their concerns. Secretary of State, I think we got Greg McNeil here that we have discussed with them. And on your page, it's got several different organizations that have signed on for endorsement or that we've worked with. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Eklund, and he's got a short presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to be incredibly brief for you all. This is just a snapshot of where we're at with our homeless population, and these are just 4 stats that I want to highlight. One is that at any given night in Kentucky, we have about 4,000 of our citizens that are homeless. And think about this in the broader sense of homelessness. If you don't have a utility bill, you are in some shape or form homeless. If you're doubling up, if you're sleeping in a car, if you're in shelter, like that is a form of homelessness. Ultimately we need 80,000 units of affordable rental to help meet the need of our workforce, of our constituents here. And then this is just a snapshot of what the Transportation Cabinet has given out in terms of this homeless ID over the past 2 years. This is a timeline of how we got here. You all are probably familiar with a lot of these bills. So Senator Buford, back in 2011, he passed the initial homeless ID bill, giving us the pathway to let people get a 1-year ID for $4. Over the course of Real ID, the transition to the Transportation Cabinet, that price was increased, which was disappointing, but it really serves as an opportunity for us to rethink how we're getting IDs out. It started a conversation with transportation where they've been incredibly helpful in trying to streamline the process for our service providers in Louisville and across the state. For us, this is a revision. This is an update of what's already been there and a way to expand access to this critical document for housing, for jobs, for anything that's out there. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Shannon Fry. She works with St. John Center, and she'll just kind of talk to you about the need and the obstacles.
Hi, I would love to invite any of you to come visit St. John Center on a daily basis. I help assist our houseless friends and neighbors with IDs, birth certificates, and social security cards from 9 to 11 every day, and there is an crazy, immense need for these documents. I probably serve about 10 to 15 individuals a day needing an ID, which we need an ID for pretty much anything: to get a prescription, to get into the Social Security office, to get your mail, to get into housing. You cannot fill out a housing application without an ID. So this is an incredibly crucial document for people needing housing. Also, I get a lot of demands for needing an ID for getting employment. That is on a regular basis. You also need an ID to get a Social Security card. So there is a absolute monstrous need for identification. I also want to take a brief moment. Sarah Jackson's very popular today, but there's a specific person at KTC that has been very helpful to us, and his name is Joe Craig, and he works at the Transportation Cabinet and has been absolutely vital and very responsive to our needs. So I really appreciate Joe.
So this is just part of an ongoing conversation. I've spoken with many of you about this bill. I've worked with Representative Bridges for the last 3 years on it. I appreciate Chairman Higdon for giving us this time, but this is about just having a dialogue, answering any questions, comments, concerns that you all may have. So if you have any questions, we're all ears.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for your presentation to help us better understand this legislation. And I voiced some concerns to you last session, and Representative Bridges, about some of the issues. I was hung up a lot on the issuing of minors a identification without parental consent. And I think you've answered that question for me. Talk to me, or explain, I guess, help us better understand if someone needs an ID, what credentials do they have to provide to get a identification, get an ID?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this only has to do with where people establish residency. So the credentials for establishing who you are stay the same for everybody. So you have to provide your birth certificate, you have to provide a social security card, and or if you have any kind of like official immigration documents that are there, including green card, like you have to have some sort of status, and you have to prove that you are who you say you are. So yeah, it doesn't change establishing identity at all. Okay. If
the on driver's license, when I guess you don't have a known address, what would that say on the driver's license?
Right now, what we've workshopped with the Transportation Cabinet is, and it would be the same as the homeless ID, like when you enter into a partnership, start working with an agency, that the agency's address would become your address of record. So in St. John's case, it's East Muhammad Ali, Louisville, Kentucky 40203. And it would change based on where you're at. So they would become your official address for that moment. And that was how it was originally written in the 2011 bill.
Of course, are you taking that document? Are you sending that in by mail, or are you all have transportation for folks to the regional office? How is that handled?
We do. We give them a bus ticket to go to the NIA Center. Most of that is on Broadway. That's where the regional office they go. They don't need an appointment to go there, so that's the most convenient because they often are needing this document as soon as possible. So we send them up to the NIA Center to obtain the ID.
Yeah, and when they go to the NIA Center, and it would be the same with any transportation office, they have to have a letter verifying that they are working with that shelter agency, and it has to be on letterhead, and there are requirements of what is in that letter. And that becomes their proof of residency in that county.
So what happens if they show up without a letter? Or they don't
They
get
can't get it. So, I mean, normally when people go to transportation to establish residency, you have to have a lease, you have to have a utility bill, you have to have a piece of mail, a deed would work. If I think pay stubs work. But when you don't have that ability to prove that you do live in the county, the letter would take the place of that.
Okay. Okay. Senator Wheeler has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I can see the efficacy of this bill. I mean, I think it, would actually accomplish some good things. I would share the chairman's concern about, giving IDs to minors without parental consent. And I stepped out for a brief second, and I missed that part, but I think sometimes when you have kids that, maybe are a little bit rebellious or something like that, maybe their parents want to know where they are so that they can get them the help they need and stuff, and this might facilitate certain behavior that we don't want to encourage. Yeah.
And you may have stepped out, but this follows the McKenzie-Vento Act, the federal for youth. These are for youth with no relationship to their parents.
So these are like ones that have filed, I guess, for I've seen it before, rarely, but the more or less parental divorce where they,
Well, they have to be verified through either a homeless shelter, a school, a nonprofit, an affiliated organization to verify that they are truly homeless without contact with their parents. It will not allow any youth to go in and say, I'm homeless, I want an ID, because they want to do it outside their parents' regard. Because like you, I think the parents should be involved in every aspect of a child's life, but there's unfortunate incidents where parents neglect their duties and their rights.
Sure.
And these children, my daughter teaches at a local high school, and it is amazing the children that are out there couch surfing without proper guidance, without parent involvement, and things of that nature. So the idea is to get them an ID so they can get that first job, so they can apply for college, work with their school counselors, because without that ID, they're helpless. So that's intent, and I appreciate your question, but just maybe to help clarify that.
No, that clarifies a lot. Thank you.
And Senator Wheeler, operationally, YMCA Safe Place in Louisville, anytime they have somebody come in, they'll start the intake and they'll start building that relationship and they'll ask those questions. And then oftentimes they find this is somebody who still has parents, but they have just left. And so they do a good amount of due diligence in vetting those cases. But like Representative Bridges said, this is a gray area of a young person isn't in state custody, but they have no functional relationship with their parents. And this is language that's been vetted previously by the Family Foundation because they have a similar concern there too. So,
with a young person that has no relation with their parents, I guess you all do a lot to help them get their birth certificates, because that's probably something that's very difficult for them to obtain. If I was going to go get an ID now, I don't know where my birth certificate is.
Yeah.
I would have a problem finding my own.
And the General Assembly passed years ago a pathway to get a free birth certificate for this same population. So this is and it even goes beyond just, it's up to 25 if you're a young person that is homeless and working with a provider, your birth certificate is free. So it is part of the engagement, the strategy of arresting their descent into homelessness and kind of building them up so that they can go for that job, so that they can get back in housing and feel supported.
Okay. We'll see no further questions. Thank you all very much for being here today. Certainly appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
A piece of paper. Well, that concludes our business for today. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, October the 18th at 1 p.m. I hear a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you all.